I mean, it is by far the single best thing that you can do for your long-term skin health. Hello and welcome to the After Hours Skin Clinic with me, Dr. Ellie Rashid.
And me, Dr. Emma Craythorne. Today we're focusing on one of the simplest, most powerful things you can do for your skin. Wear your SPF.
Of course, we've talked about this before. How could we call ourselves consultant dermatologists if we didn't talk about SPF? But this episode is the very best of our SPF knowledge. We're covering the top 5 facts you need to know about sunscreen.
So we'll also tackle some myths, some common worries about ingredients, and explain why not all sunscreens are created equal.
Stick around to find out why it's incredibly important for you to take it off at the end of the day.
Think about this as your SPF super masterclass. Okay, so let's go through the top 5 facts about SPF. Obviously there's like 7 years worth of podcasting that we could do on the subject of SPF. So we just need to distill this down to 10 minutes and 5 facts that are really important. So I thought we could divide this up into 5 rules about SPF. Is that okay?
Perfect.
So I'm going to do the first rule. And the first rule is the really simple one. Just put it on.
Done. Tick. Rule 1.
We'll do this podcast quickly. Just put it on. That's it. Done.
We can talk about it for 7 years or in 3 minutes.
Okay, so why does somebody need to put it on?
I mean, it is by far the single best thing that you can do for your long-term skin health is to put SPF on every single day. And the reason why it's really important is because UV radiation can cause damage to our skin cells, and it causes stress in our cells, and it damages the DNA within our cells. And so by creating a shield on our skin, we can reduce the amount of damage that's done and in some cases eliminate the damage that's done by UV radiation.
That is it in a nutshell. There is this idea that people will then say, well, I don't need to put my SPF on every single day because there isn't enough of those damaging rays in the winter months, and I actually need to get my vitamin D, so I'm not going to put it on in the winter months. But to dispel some of that misinformation in a way, you have to remember that the UVA and UVB, yes, they're present more in the middle of the summer, in the middle of the day, but actually those levels of UVA are still present throughout the scope of the day and across the year. Yes, it might not be in such high levels as you get midsummer, but the point of it is it's actually cumulative. So you will be spending several minutes to hours outside every single day, and that accumulates. When we're thinking about true long-term health, long-term protection of the skin in the way that you so eloquently described why we would put a filter on, it's protecting against that cumulative, so in other words, that build-up of ultraviolet damage that happens throughout the day, throughout the year.
Sometimes people will say, yeah, but if you have pigmented skin, then you don't need to wear sun protection every single day. But actually, those of us that have pigmented skin, we're sometimes more at risk of post-inflammatory pigmentation of certain pigmentary conditions like melasma, and it's a bit more tricky to treat. And so then for people with skin of colour, need to consider sun protection throughout the whole year because UVA can actually prolong that pigmentation. Things won't clear up as quickly. And even if you've got post-inflammatory pigmentation from acne, again, that will just hang around for longer if you're not protecting your skin from UV radiation and the full spectrum of UV radiation, including high energy visible light, which is also important to protect against.
I completely agree. So whenever we're thinking about that ultimate layer of protection, applying your SPF every single day of the year is going to just overall improve skin health. And there are multiple studies that show this. There was a big study called the NAMBOR study, and it looked at daily application of SPF over a 4-year period and showing that it reduced or almost kind of stalled the aging of the skin compared to what the skin had been like at the start of the study. And then another study comparing people who applied their SPF every single day compared to those who didn't. And again, that showed a reduction in kind of the age, essentially, of the skin compared to those who didn't apply it. So we do know that putting your SPF on every day is going to be helpful for that long-term skin health and helping it to live better for longer. So I know that it is contentious, and people will say in the literature, oh, you don't need to apply it every single day. You're only applying it for that skin cancer risk. But for many people, they're actually applying their SPF to have better overall skin health, and it's not just the cancer risk. When we think about how the UVA and the UVB interacts with the skin, it's the UVB is a bit more superficial in the skin and typically is responsible for the burning episodes. UVA penetrates deeper into the skin and it kind of damages the dermis, so that middle layer of the skin, and is often responsible for aging. So in a very rudimentary way, you can think of UVA for aging and UVB for burning, although given enough of both can, damage the other way as well.
I think there is this misconception that you can somehow build up a tolerance to UV radiation. And so I've seen some quite famous people that have said, oh, we're fine. We don't put any sun protection on. We just keep the kids in the shade all the time. Now, if you've got children, you know that that is impossible to keep your children in shade the entire time. Then they also say, yeah, but it's fine because they've just built up a tolerance to UV radiation, so their skin actually doesn't burn anymore. But I just think that's so dangerous. One, because they're children. We should be protecting our children's skin from UV radiation. If you don't want to put sun protection on, at least put them in UPF clothing that protects their skin from UV radiation, and then just put some sunscreen on their face. We should be proactively doing that. We shouldn't be letting our children burn in the sun.
Letting your child burn in the sun is a really, irresponsible thing to do. Burning in childhood increases that child's risk of developing melanoma and a non-melanoma skin cancer. And the more burning episodes you have, the more that risk increases. So it is our responsibility to ensure that burning never happens. I do kind of agree in a way that you can build up your tolerance to being in the sun, but the only way you build that up is because you've already got DNA damage. You've already damaged your skin. In other words, you've then got a tan, and the tan does protect you somewhat. That's the job of a tan. But by the time you've got a tan, you've already got the DNA damage anyway. So, I mean, why you would want to do that, I'm not really quite sure. And why you would want your children to have that, I definitely don't know.
I mean, I just have to look at the sun and I get a tan, and I'm putting Factor 50 on, slapping it on. But I mean, even with perfect use of sun protection, there is still a percentage of UV radiation that we'll be getting in.
Absolutely. I come back from our holidays and I have a tan, and I am diligent about trying not to get one. But I am somebody who loves being outside. I love being in the water. I love being on a boat. I love playing tennis. I love being on the beach. I love being outside. And no matter how diligent I am, I still get a bit of a tan. I'm actively certainly not trying to get the tan. In fact, I really don't want it. But we never protect ourselves properly. So that DNA damage, which is what gives you the tan, is happening. And so I think another fact to think about is, well, why do some people not put it on? Why would you not put on something that, number one, is going to keep your skin healthier for longer, number two, is going to keep you looking younger for longer, and number three, is going to protect you from getting skin cancers? Like, why would you not put that on?
Makes no sense.
So I think some people decide not to put it on because of misinformation, and they think that by putting certain chemicals on their skin, they're going to get absorbed into their bloodstream, and then they're going to be lodged in different components of their body, and that's going to cause them to develop skin cancers or internal cancers, and they'll die as a consequence of putting their SPF on. I thoroughly think that some people think that that chain of events happens, when obviously that is not true. But I think that there's been, quite high profile people talking about a chain of events as such happening like that, and people believe that, but that's just not true. But I think that puts people off.
If someone told me that I could put a cream on every single day that would reduce my risk of developing the most common form of cancer, skin cancer, I mean, why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah. Just for this theoretical, non-proven risk that you're going to absorb chemicals that have been proven to be safe and been shown to be safe. But I think people do get paranoid and do get worried about chemicals in general, putting any kind of chemical on their skin, but will happily eat those chemicals,
Yeah, I was
or
just about to say
smoke those
that.
chemicals.
Yeah, exactly. Drink those
Drink
chemicals.
those chemicals. Some people have the misconception that these formulations are bad for the oceans as well. And, any reason not to put on the SPF, but that is one of the reasons. And some people think, oh, these are damaging the coral. But again, that has no proven link to it at all. And it's such a tenuous link, if ever. And then you were told, oh, you can then put on mineral SPFs because it's the chemical SPFs that are doing it. But actually then somebody else says, no, it's the mineral SPFs. So there's a whole lot of statements made about SPFs. And I don't really understand why there is so much scaremongering online about SPFs. I don't
It's
know
very
why.
clickbaity, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know why it's such a subject that people are keen to try and find a reason not to wear their SPF. I actually really just don't
Don't get
that.
it.
No.
I think when people didn't know better, like in the decades before, well, fair enough. You know, if you don't know the evidence and things haven't been proven, then I can understand why people might not have wanted to apply SPF. And people were actively putting oils on to try and burn themselves and get a tan and get crispy skin. But I think nowadays we know so much better, and we should be doing better if we know better.
But you do know there's a lot of people still not doing it. Okay, so we've put it on. We've thought about the reasons why people don't put it on. Should we think about how to put it on and how you should put it on properly?
Yeah, so the first thing to say is I'm not such a fan of SPF within a moisturizer or within a makeup product, because you would never apply enough to get the coverage and to get the protection that it says that you will get on the bottle.
That's why I don't love the tinted SPF.
Yes. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think tinted SPF, I don't mind if you've already done your base layer of SPF and then you want to go in with a second layer, then you can just less of it basically, because you're never going to use as much as you require to use, because it will make your face colour look a bit weird. But the amount that I normally recommend is 2 finger lengths worth for your entire face. Some people say 3 if you're going to think about your whole face and your whole neck and décolletage sort of area.
And I like to do it by, because that does seem quite a lot, that I'll often put out maybe 1 finger's worth first and then put that on and then put on another finger's worth to make sure that's applied. And I always think about patting it in rather than, I watch some people putting on SPF and they just squidge it into the palm of their hand and then rub their hand together and then smear it across their face. And that's achieved quite a lot in keeping your palms protected, but not a lot in making sure you have a nice even film on the face. So I do think about it in a way that you're applying it, trying to make this very protective shield from your face skin to the world, and how you want to try and make that as even as possible without getting any gaps. So sometimes I think, particularly for people who have conditions that might flare because of ultraviolet radiation, or people who have melasma and that might become worse because of bits of ultraviolet radiation, that putting on that in a 2-layered approach is sometimes a bit better, so you've got every kind of gap covered.
I normally tell patients, because most people will start with their SPF in the middle of the face and then move outwards. So I normally say, when you put the 2 finger lengths onto your fingers, just to purposefully put some of that application on the outside aspects of the face, because when you rub it, you're sort of left with minimal product by the time you get to the lateral aspects of your face. So to purposefully put some there, so you're getting that full coverage. And then not to forget the eyelids, not to forget the ears.
I think that's really important, remembering around the edges of the face, because whenever I think of patients, and I do a lot of skin cancer as part of my job, and you can get a condition called actinic keratoses, which are areas where the skin isn't being made quite properly because of ultraviolet damage. And these look red, they look a little bit scaly. You can often see them on the top of maybe a bald man's head in his 70s, these little scaly red areas. But actually where they tend to come, and you see them most prominently, typically are on the sides of the forehead, on the temples and down the sides of the face rather than the mid-face, actually. So because the UV is usually coming at you from side to side rather than necessarily bang on the front of your face, because we tend to turn our heads away if we're directly faced with light. So it's very important to remember doing down the sides. I like that way you do it. So put it on properly.
Yes,
put the Ellie way.
Oh, I might coin that.
Yeah.
Ellie method. I need to do a video immediately.
Okay, so we then want to think about putting on the right kind of SPF. What does that mean, the right kind of SPF? Well, in my mind, it kind of means that your SPF has got very good coverage of ultraviolet B, which is what that number tends to be, and ultraviolet A. Now, If you want to get really geeky about it, you can then look at the actual filters themselves, and you can go online. The Inky decoder does this really nicely, where you can see which part of the electromagnetic spectrum each of those filters actually block and how strong they are. So I'm such a geek, but I love it.
I know, you're in your element now. Go, take it away. The stage is yours.
So you can really look at every filter and see exactly what that filter is going to protect you from and how strong that filter is. And then what you want to do is have a good look at the formulation to see all of the different filters, to check that you really have this true broad spectrum coverage. So that's protecting against that whole spread of the electromagnetic spectrum. But also it's important to know how strong they are, because you want them to last. So you don't want them to cover, but just be a little bit kind of like weak in their coverage, just covering it for like an hour or so. You want them to have a good kind of strength of cover. So that's the most important thing, I think, that you've got this very good broad spectrum coverage that lasts long time, and it's been through testing to show that it will last. We have these standardized tests that allocate which SPF and how protective your UVA is. So you want to know that it's been through those testings, know that it's effective, and in my mind, it's very important to understand that full breadth of coverage of the filters.
So there was this Australian independent study, the Choice Report, that looked at 20 different sun protection sunscreens. And out of those 20, 16 of them didn't meet the standard that they reported to meet. So if it said it was an SPF 50, it was more like an SPF 4. And only 4 of those actually delivered on all the aspects that they said that they would deliver on. By 16 to fail.
I think it's shocking. I really think it's outrageous. Because when you think about what some people are using these products for, I mean, I think one failed from being down at an SPF 50 to one that was less than 10.
There's 4,
It
SPF
was
4.
So, I just think that a lot of people are using these products to protect them from getting skin cancers. A lot of the products are used, especially by kind of teenagers, to try and keep their skin as good as possible for as long as possible. And because they're quite fashionable brands, you must feel quite cheated that if you were diligently putting these things on or got sunburnt as a consequence of it, it's really shocking. I mean, I suppose one way around that is, if you're selling it, there should be a link to quite readily look at the product to see where it was tested, how it was tested, and does it meet that criteria. That would be a great idea. You're selling an SPF, you can click on a link and say, okay, this is the study. I mean, La Roche-Posay should be loud and proud because they were way up at 72 or something like that. You want to link to that study and say, yeah, we say we're SPF 50 plus, but we were actually SPF 72. And should SPF companies have a responsibility of proving and showing where their formulations are? So I think if you want to be sure that you're putting the right kind of SPF on, it really is looking for companies that are probably publishing their SPF actual data to show that this is how effective this is on the skin. And I would imagine more and more companies are going to do that. And then there's companies that off the top of your head that are doing this very well. And they are people like La Roche-Posay, Avène, Eucerin, Dayscript from Clara. Lots of extra testing there.
Another important fact is that you must remove your SPF effectively. At the end of the day, once all that protection's been done a great job, you need to then prep your skin, cleanse it effectively, and then get it ready for your nighttime repair routine.
And part of that is actually because otherwise, if you've gone to sleep with it on your face, it is going to be starting to break down. And actually that breakdown process of those filters is not going to be really great for your skin, particularly some of those more mineral-based breakdown products. So yeah, you want to get it off, get your face all nice and clean for your nighttime routine.
To round this episode off, let's run through our favourite sunscreens.
Well, that's very easy for me. I love the La Roche-Posay Anthelios range. I love the Altruist range. I kind of very much trust them. I've seen the studies that they do. I know that they are delivering what it says on the can. So they are definitely my top 2. And of course, I love the Clara Dayscript, which is what I use. I know what the testing is on that. We publish our testing data. So that's where I would go.
So my 3 would be, I love the Avène with their Trisorb technology, and it protects against high energy visible light. I love the Eucerin anti-pigment sunscreen and the actinic control sunscreen. And I love the day script from Clara. Okay, so the top 5 things you need to bear in mind when putting on your SPF is to actually put it on.
Yeah, put it on.
The second thing is to challenge some of the reasons why people don't put it on. Challenge them and then realize you need to put it on and put it on.
Then put it on properly. Put on the right kind of SPF. Don't waste your time putting on something that's not actually going to do the job.
And make sure you take it off properly. And that's a wrap on our SPF masterclass. If you don't already, hopefully we've convinced you to use it daily, properly, and with confidence.
And if you've enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe. It means a lot to us and it helps us reach more people who are interested in their skin, just like you.
And if you've got SPF questions or product favourites, share them with us on Instagram or by email. You'll find the details in the show notes.
Until next time, take care of yourself and your skin. Wear your SPF every day and take it off at night.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you for golden rule number 8, everything you need to know about retinoids.